Welcome to another session, Searching for Answers. We're deep in the middle and beyond the middle now of 1 John, the little letter at the close of the New Testament, getting down toward Jude and Revelation, these three little letters. And we are looking at challenging language. Beloved, don't believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see whether they're from God or not. We'll have to get into that right away. Dr. Bernard Taylor, Old Testament scholar. Dr. Leo Rancelin, New Testament scholar, Loma Linda University. Beverly Maravilla, Pastor Bev, who is beloved by her congregation, Family Ministries, La Sierra University Church.
Right.
My name is John Jones at La Sierra University, and here we go. Grab whatever translation works for you, and let's get into it. Leo, beloved, do not test every spirit.
Yes.
Kick us off with this. Get us down through the first half dozen verses, if you will,
Okay.
and let's see what we can make of it.
So chapter 4, verse 1. Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see if they are of God. For many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit which confesses that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. And every spirit which does not confess Jesus is not from God. And this is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard that is coming, and now is already in the world. You are from God, little children, and you have overcome them, because greater is the one who is in you than the one who is in the world. They are from the world. For this reason, they speak of the world, and the world hears them. We are from God. The one who knows God hears us. Whoever is not from God does not hear us. By this we know the spirit of truth and the spirit of error.
Wow, the polarities continue, don't they? It's really black and white, can we say? Really
Sharp contrasts.
Yeah. What do you think?
Well, here, once again, you have a reference to false prophets, which I think we need to connect with the Antichrists and the deceivers and the liars. And it just seems to me that John is once again alluding to those who used to be part of the community of believers and now have left them. And this is how he's characterizing them. The other thing that I'm struck with is we have, I believe, this document that came into being towards the end of the first century. And we have this language of confession and denial, which suggests an emerging kind of orthodox belief. This community is struggling to figure out truth from error and having to articulate some aspects of the person of Christ and the work of Christ that in their eyes is orthodoxy. And there are some beliefs that are contrary to that and out of step with that. And those beliefs get characterized in a very, very different way. The other thing I think that I'm struck with is this is a charismatic, pneumatic community in which the Spirit seems to be palpably present. Two groups claiming that the Spirit resides within them and the need for discernment to test the spirits to see if they are of God. So a perennial dilemma of charismatic kinds of communities seeking to ascertain truth from error. We see that, I think, front and center in this homily, especially here in these first 6 verses.
Yeah. So the dualism on a spiritual level is reflected in a very real dualism, if you please, of polarization in the world and maybe even within the community.
Right.
Yeah. It's this is a painful business in some ways, isn't it? What do you think, Bernard?
Would you just say a little bit about for the listeners, what you mean by charismatic in this context?
Yeah.
Okay, what I mean by that is earlier on he has talked about them being anointed, right? This is in verse 220. And you have an anointing from the Holy One, and you know all things.
Yeah.
So I think there's a reference here earlier on to the indwelling Spirit, the anointing of the Spirit, there's all kinds of proposals as to what that ritual may have looked like. Some think it perhaps was with oil and some kind of ceremony within the community. But in any case, the Johannine house churches here, the believers have been anointed by the Spirit, and he says, you know all things, and the Spirit teaches you all things. And so there's not a whole lot of moral teaching, as you know, in the Johannine literature, except for love one another. It seems that John trusts the leadership and guidance of the Spirit. That's all well and good until you have divergent, pneumatic, charismatic, spiritual experiences. How do you discern truth from error when you've got that dynamic? And I think clearly, within these house churches in Ephesus, that's what's at play here.
Good.
Needing to discern
That's helpful.
these spiritual, charismatic experiences.
Yes. What occurs to me here, first off, the word Antichrist is rare in the New Testament.
Right.
And anti can mean opposite to or in place of.
Right.
And I wonder to what extent even this was a pejorative word at the time. Now, we hurl it like an invective. But this may be and it is a different position, and it's a sort of thing that the point of difference is something that you have to pay attention to even know what they're talking about, which is to say they're they're saying that at the baptism of Jesus, the Christ descended, and Christ means anointed, that there was an anointing here. That's when he became the Christ. And they believed that God couldn't die. Therefore, at the cross, that same departed and left this human body, which had been empowered during the time and now and was the means of divine communication, but that Jesus wasn't fully human, that he took over a human body. And it's interesting how these developed and the strength in which it was opposed for the first 3 centuries. The nature of Jesus was a big issue. And it was split over the letter iota, homoousios and homoousios. And there was one iota of a difference.
Right.
And so here we are with this situation. And notice that the confessors that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh.
Right.
And it's that combination that is at issue here. And this early as it appears to be, the notion that this might be 2nd century is now long outdated, and the passion with which they are willing to sustain what already is deemed to be orthodoxy. Orthodoxy is a very costly item. As purified gold, pure anything is expensive. Orthodoxy is the pure truth believed to be held in a particular place at a particular time.
Which implies many exclusions of many other things as part of the high price you pay.
Yes.
Right.
And one of them is love. And as the sides are drawn, so the words start and the hate and all the rest of it. And there is this desire to purge that the purity may be maintained. And there is this problem. In 1989, when I was pastoring in upstate New York in Rochester, Jacob Neusner, the most prolific living Jewish writer, came and spoke at the University of Rochester, and I went to hear him. And he had many important things to say. He was a world authority in Jewish-Christian dialogue and relationships and all of that. But the one thing that I went away from there with that just was like acid in my stomach. He said, those who care hate, and the more they care, the more they hate. And I cannot counter that. And it's not just a Christian phenomenon.
No.
And this balance of believing and caring is so difficult to do. And it's this early.
Yeah, exactly.
In a congregation that wants to love, believes it loves,
Yeah.
but there are some things that we will not accept. And it is the demand that our way be the right way. Here it is,
Yep.
that early,
Yep.
that long ago.
They cared
Yep.
too much
Yes.
in one sense.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely right. But let's not forget that the central issue, in my estimation, is the incarnation, right?
Oh,
The
yes.
humanity of Jesus.
Absolutely.
Opening
For
sentence.
John,
Yes, well
that's a
said.
non-negotiable for him.
Opening sentence. That which we touched with our hands.
Exactly.
This is what was coming when that was
So-
said.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it's not a
Right.
trivial issue in his eyes.
Oh, yes.
Right. For
Yes.
him, it's central. the
Oh, that's
incarnation.
why they care so much about it.
Right.
Yes.
So he's come in the flesh, and that is precisely pushing back against that kind of dualism that said, well, there was this doubleness. There's this physical body, and there's this kind of spiritual being that you sketched very well for us. And it is true. The church fussed over this intensively for the first 3 centuries, and in some ways has continued to.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's easy to be accommodating when you don't much care about the ground you stand on in accommodating others. Wow. Where does this leave us as true believers? I think you're posing the question in a way.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
I think it's an ancient question, and it's a question we have today. I think you're spot on. I think we're constantly in this, trying to figure out this wolf in sheep's clothing, and what are we guarding? What are we following? What is truth? And it's an ancient anxiety, and then I also think it's a present anxiety. I think it's a very modern anxiety. We're still very much in this spot. And the fascinating thing, it's going to bookend it, because what we're trying to do is, abide, live in this belief, abide in Jesus, live with Jesus in this. And in the next couple verses, we're going to go back to the language of love. So in this anxiety, as we're trying to figure this out, then there's going to be another reminder of love. And we just finished talking about love, which is quite fascinating.
And it's going to come up immediately after.
Right.
Exactly.
So, it's a...
So let us love. Whoever does not love does not know God, for God is love. Okay, well, we can be very facile about that, but then if orthodoxy demands a price, love exerts. Does it mean that we can become shallow and casual about what is the core essence of our being over against this other whom we're to love, who maybe has a very radically different, unorthodox even understanding? There's something in the makeup of us as humans, I think, that wrestles and struggles. On the one hand, love. On the other hand, test the spirits, right? Yeah. Well, here we are.
The other thing I'm struck with is when you have, as I said earlier, a charismatic community focused on the Spirit, leading and guiding you and teaching you all things. This is what happens. Part of me feels like you folks need the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5-7, and perhaps you would not find yourself in this situation of just being so unduly reliant upon the Spirit teaching and leading you to know all things. And yet I back off on that because when I read Galatians 5 and 6, I think there Paul speaks of the fruits of the Spirit, and I think comes awfully close to saying if you've got the Spirit within you, you're good. He's going to lead and guide you to truly love in the fundamental, profound way that's Christ-like. And yet, it seems like that is not pastoral. That sketch of the Christian walk that is so focused on the Spirit doesn't seem to be working here, you know?
You see, the opposite of what is here is not casual.
Yeah.
It is, the opposite is love, a deep, abiding, caring love. So that's how here it's envisaged we will avoid the hating. And you see, you come to verse 7, dearly beloved, we gather together in the sight of God and these people to unite in the bonds of matrimony, this man and this woman. What on earth's that got to do with this? We take verses out of here for the marriage ceremony. It's that close together. That depth of love is immediately joined to, juxtaposed to that strong language. So after the language, we go back to the depth, the caring love. There is caring. The caring love keeps us from hating. But when hate becomes the opposite in disagreement, then that's I think the issue.
Splendid point, but you're basically saying we need to fully grasp the Johannine notion of love.
Yes.
Right? Is what you're saying. And he said earlier of Jesus laying down his life. There it is. Self-sacrificial love. That's awesome. Seems to me that's what he's trying to say.
It's a very deep demand. If we look at our being down to the genomic level, we are creatures who function on the distinction between self and other.
Yes.
That's what we're made out of. And to call us beyond that, orthodoxy is expensive. Love is even more expensive, it seems to me, because it's just not in us naturally. Pastor Bev, having laid all of that,
the struggle is real. I think, I think that, I think you're absolutely right. Everything that you're saying, I think is kind of like I said before, it is the present experience now. We want so much to be in part of these communities. I think that's why we gather, right? In these religious circles as reminders. We are communal people. We exist individually, but we're individuals within a common community. So this will, I'm thinking of it, will stretch us. If we're trying to get more intimately to understand what this abiding in Christ or living in God and allowing for that to be transformational experience, it's gonna interrupt a lot. And this, as we kind of get ready to read the next portion, that is that loving. As we think of love, it's the difference. It's very different. This is not I love Taco Bell or I love pizza. It is this in-depth understanding of prioritizing the relationships that make us different from all the other creatures that God created. What does the imprint mean that you were created in the image of this Creator, and how we work through this tension, this dualistic tension, I think describes, the common experience. How do we work through that? I appreciate this because it's confessions of ancient struggles that are present struggles.
Interesting element there that has, it's an area that has been of interest and concern to me, especially since coming to these United States. It is very rare these days in America, in the United States, to talk about people. We are not for people, we are for persons. And When we read this, it's easy for us to say, what's in this for me? What I think is underlying driving, one of the factors driving the apostle here is that the question is, what's in this for us? How are we going to survive? This is threatening our community. Not individuals primarily, although there's the risk of it coming down, but if we move around together, we can create the environment, you know, circling the wagon, to use an American idiom or metaphor. We will be able to get through this. And we bridge from east to west too often by singularizing what is communal. In 1 Corinthians 6, the Spirit doesn't dwell in the individuals. The Spirit dwells in the community of individuals. And here there is the desire to, I think, at least as I hear, to protect the community in all of this. And loving is a communal activity.
Oh, I think so. Yeah. Really.
It's a hortatory subjunctive. Let us.
Yes.
Right. Let us.
Yes.
Let us
Love one another. Is anyone bothered like I am with verses 5 and 6?
No,
He
because we didn't bring it up.
He basically says they are of the world, you know, we know God.
Yeah.
You know, verse 6, we are of God. The one who knows God listens to us, hears us. Whoever is not from God does not hear us and listen to us. And that's how we can distinguish the spirit of truth from the spirit of error. It's a level of confidence that is just, to me, so striking. We know God, and we are able to discern truth from error.
Well, we've
How
read
about
we've read in chapter 321 that we have full boldness before God.
Yeah.
But it turns into a finger-shaking boldness at this point, it seems to me. And yes, I think we are bothered by if it begins to assume overtones of arrogance. We cringe, don't we? Now, there is such a thing as holy fervor and holy boldness, but I think that their words grab us in a grating way here, because maybe we misread the tone. I don't know, but I think these words in verse 6 are aimed at the people of verse 5. They want. I think verse 6 is saying, you people who are of the world, listen to us. I think that's the gulf that's being bridged by this aggressive language.
Yes, it is.
I don't know if that helps or not, but
And I raise that because I've seen pastors and church members embrace this rhetoric and have a stance of self-righteousness, if you don't mind me saying, that oftentimes leads to challenging situations within the church. It's amazing to me how some church members just embrace this rhetoric. And I just think we need to be careful.
It's almost like this caution to preserve, like this preservation, you know, trying to steer away from it. I mean, but you taught me Christian history. So, you know, it would be interesting.
there are plenty of lessons there.
It is interesting to think about how much the Christian church has struggled through trying to preserve itself. And I think this is definitely, you know, signs of the beginning of that. But what is really helpful, and I think it's helpful as us readers, present readers now, is to understand this historically and what you've talked about, what, you know, these house churches were struggling through is quite significant from what we're working through today. We perhaps don't have the same anxieties of persecution, if you will, as they did. So I think for me, it's a humbling exercise to, pay attention to the context of what we're reading, and be mindful of the history of the church, and then think about different ways that we can adopt in what we know now, right? So maybe now for us, it's a moment to exercise, what does this us mean? And our us has stretched, our boundaries have stretched because we're not here, but we're not absent of this history in our own affirmations of Christianity. Like this has informed our past also. So I think that's helpful in some ways.
And our lives are not on the line.
Our lives are not
Right.
on the line.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
So-
There are countries where that is the case.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So imagine if you die and it turns out that it wasn't a canonical text anyway, and that sort of situation, and they've made major changes at great risk,
Yeah.
and it's. So now they have gathered a flock together, and it turns out that a couple of wolves in sheep clothing came in, and everything is at threat. And your work, and you know, these are human, and so it goes.
And that's what helps me deal with this, because I think you have an incredibly fragile community whose
yeah.
well-being is being threatened.
Right. Yeah.
And so in that scenario, this kind of draconian pastoral strategy is necessary. We're going to, when we get to 2 John, we're going to see that again, because the same thing, if they don't confess that Jesus Christ has come in the flesh, hey, I don't want you to provide them hospitality. And if you do so, you participate in their evil deeds. Yikes. Again, striking language to seek to create cohesion and community, us against them, preserve the well-being of the church.
No.
When we are threatened is when we behave the worst.
Yes.
You know, and even under inspiration, we're capable of some stringent pushback at times, aren't we? Yeah.
And they probably never thought that 2,000 years later,
Right.
they'll be poring over this text. And
Yeah.
Sure.
No, this is an occasional piece. We
Right.
do need to recognize that.
Exactly. And I think there are other pastoral strategies for conflict.
For sure.
Besides this one.
And the church is finding its way. There's no church
Right.
manual.
Yeah.
And they don't have backgrounds in Robert's rules and all of the things that we are comfortable with. And there is order. There is tradition that has been found to work in terms of how to run a church and an organization.
And we still manage to fumble the ball quite often, don't we?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah. You know, to locate the text in its historical context is not to somehow nullify it or somehow take the punch out of it that is legitimate and appropriate in our lives, but it does help us, at least I think, to read with eyeglasses of some perspective.
Right.
There are other moments in the New Testament where the gospel comes through in other terms and tones. We need to recognize that.
Exactly.
So once we've got that clearly in focus, we can read this, we can learn the lessons, and those lessons come back out again in some of the most ringing language in the New Testament next time. When we get together, we look at this, beginning with verse 7, beloved, let us love one another.
Yes.
We will take up that ringing language next time as we continue to open the Word and search for the answers.